In our last question, last week, question number 9, we were dealing with chapter 1 and looking at the possessions that he lost. And we asked the question, what was God's commentary? Does he notice our character during adversity? And we would answer what? Yes. And I left off by looking at the commentary in verse 22. This is God, through the writer of this book, giving this history. In all this, Job sinned not. He's looking at his character. He's looking at his thoughts. He's looking at his words. And he has already expressed his words. Blessed be Jehovah. God giveth, God takes away. Blessed be his name. And he puts all that together, and he did not sin, nor charge God foolishly. That's important to God. Not all, that's our words and our thoughts, but the idea of charging God foolishly, you could not see any semblance of that in his words, could you? And the great thing is God couldn't either. God knows this inside out. He couldn't either. And so he notices our character. But all of a sudden we come into chapter 2. Do you see redundancy there? Again, it came to pass on the day that when the sons of God came to present themselves before Jehovah, and Satan was among them. Anything new there? We have a new day. Who's assembling before God? They're called the sons of God. We established in our first lesson last time, that when we see sons of God, we'll see it in the latter part of Job, where before, during creation, sons of God are already there. That's not people. That's not the sons of God. That people would be that will call on the name of the Lord. But they're angelic beings. And just think about this in a concept. What's the biggest way that we can describe our universe? Or describe our place? It's universe, isn't that? It's universal. You got anything bigger than that? It's the universe. God hadn't created the universe, and yet he had created angels. And is God outside the universe? It's hard to comprehend. He's not. He didn't create it. It's sort of around. He's outside of it. He makes it. It has the beginning. And when he does, the sons of God are already there, giving him glory. And it's hard to understand. There was a creation of spiritual beings before creation of our universe. And apparently there was, as you read in your bulletin today, the point I'm trying to make in that lesson is a sense of that there was rebellion. And I'm looking at indicators for the Bible. Angelic host. Satan is one of them. Apparently he's the leader. He had a following. And all of a sudden, when we come to the Garden of Eden, what tree were they not to eat of? Good. Where did evil come from? You'll have to read the bulletin to get the rest of the story. But there's a sense that before all this began, you have angelic hosts, and here's Satan. Satan is a spiritual being just like angels, so is it hard for him to go to and fro throughout all the earth, see what's going on? Is it hard for angels to do that? That spirit world that we're not aware of. There's indications, there's kind of pointers as we meditate upon those things and see those things that realize, no, he's not governed flesh and blood and limited in space and that sort of thing. They can go everywhere. So we're back to our point. It seemed like he's been doing that in chapter 1. And Satan came also among them to present himself before Jehovah. We already noted that he's presenting himself before Jehovah, and he has to ask permission. So we're not going to see anything new there either. And Jehovah said unto Satan, hast thou considered my servant Job? For there is none like him in all the earth. A perfect man, upright man, and one that feareth God. These are the same terms we've already looked at. He was blameless. Perfect means complete in the sense that no blame could be against him. He is upright in his dealings with mankind. They could attest to that. God could attest to that. He feared God. He turned away from evil. Reverencing God, he turned away from evil. There's nobody like him. And yet thou movest me against him to destroy him without cause. This is not anything new. He's moved him. There's God involved. And the best way we say it, well, God doesn't will evil to be upon us in the sense of, and from that lookout, from that facet of evil and God and Satan. But he does bring it on. And he did that. And destroy him without cause. And only thing new is that Satan has a new thing to present to God. But I want to pause there. When I look at Jehovah asking Satan, where have you been? Where has going to and fro on the altar of earth? This is what it says. Whence comest thou? And there's a part of me said, God, don't you know? Don't you? And if I were Job and I heard that, which he doesn't, I say, hey, this is a big deal with me. And God, you're not even recognizing that? Well, from one aspect, God has a lot to look over. And sometimes we need to realize that who is man that they're mindful of me? Even in this particular time. It's redundant. He said the same thing to Satan before Satan brings affliction upon Job and his possessions, his servants, and his children. And to me, to stop there and to think about that is to realize I'm looking at stuff from God, and God's okay when he looks over all the universe at the same time. He's not governed by time. And he just asked the same question to Satan, as if nothing has happened. And that's not true. Because does he notice the character when we're going through our adversity? What do you see there that there's something new that he adds that's not redundant from chapter 1? He didn't charge me foolishly. What do you find in verse 4 at the end of it? Still. Does that seem something new? Now, Satan, I've allowed you to touch his possessions. And I'm asking you, where you been? All through the earth is what you hear all that. That's what is happening. God's overseeing everything, and he doesn't bring Job to the forefront like we might think he ought to do, especially if I'm Job. But I need to be comforted as God is dealing with everybody's life at the same time. He still recognizes us as individuals, doesn't he? Because what does he say he still does? What does he say he still does? Although thou hast moved me against him. I hadn't done that in chapter 1 yet. But after things in chapter 1, I saw that he did not do that. And he says he has no cause to be destroyed. He still holds forth his integrity. Even after you've moved me to do what I've done, present, God sees us as we go through our adversities, and he adds commentary. He knows, he sees. Is he a personal God, or is he just a God of the universe? He's personal, isn't he? He knows Job. He knows you, and he knows me. When we're going through our difficulties, and at the same time, may we rise above that during that time and realize he sees everybody as individuals. And he can bring them all together and just act like nothing's being done. That's God. He knows individually what's being done. So don't think when we look at this that he's just coming from a blank slate. Where have you been? He knows where he's been, and he knows the reaction of that. David, you had your hand up? Yes, he does. And David asked the question, who is man that are mindful of him when he considered what? Einstein. When I stare at the stars, stare at the heavens, it's so massive. Who am I, little old me, that thou art mindful of me? That becomes the same point. But he's working from the standpoint of God, how wonderful God is, instead of having doubts about the fact of God doesn't care. So God's a personal God, and the point, but we would call them deists that said, I set everything in motion and I back off. I'm not involved at all in the lives of men. But you sure do have to overlook a lot of scripture, don't you? That he saved man from sins. He's dealing with nations, bringing about Judah, all the things that he's doing. His providence is all through here of preserving the people through Joseph, and Joseph is going through what? Adversity. He's going through evil. God brings that upon his life. He has his purposes. So I hope we can get a complete overall view of that in our minds and realize that he's seeing us as we go through our adversity. He is observing that all through that time. He's a personal God. He cares about us, and he realizes he has not ceased to be having his integrity in place. It is genuine. He still blesses God. He still appreciates God, what God has done. God gives, God takes away. Everything's under his control. And now we hit stage 2 of the things that he is having to go through. What was Satan's philosophy in his second challenge? We're in Job, the 2nd chapter. What was his philosophy now?
He was trying to get you to show up on Job, but eventually he was going to turn on God.
Okay. And how does he crank up the heat and the pressure? It's physical. Children, emotional contact, they're my children, and he lost all of those. That's true. But it's still different that when you affect my body, my nerve endings, my comfort zone, what I feel is comforting. You can talk about boils and on other people. So that must have been tough. And then when you have one, what is it? It's a little different. It's the worst thing you've ever seen. Because what? You're feeling the pain. And Satan hits him. He says, because if you will do this. Now, he first of all charged, see, devil is one that is going to blaspheme. He's going to accuse. And he's accusing Job to God. He will curse you to your face if you start hitting at his possessions and his oxen and his camels, and just add a little bit. We'll kill all your children too. You do that because you've built a hedge around him that nobody can touch him. And God invites the investigation. He invites the test. And why God could do that? Why would he invite that? Because he's testing Job. It's a time for Job to be tested. With evil, yes, it's going to be painful. And he will test him, and he recognizes he has not sinned and charged God foolishly, and he doesn't even know what's been happening behind the scenes. You and I are privy to it. That's a benefit to us. That's why I think it's in Scripture that we can learn from, and we want to do that. But now you're going to touch his body. You're going to touch his body. But how do you know that Satan doesn't have complete control of things, even when he touches his body? Who said that? David?
Satan was not allowed by God to kill Job.
That's right. Allowed by God. God's in control. He has to ask permission, but God invites the test. All this is happening that we need to grab a knowledge when we go through our testing and things that happen to us. That we don't charge God foolishly. That we don't have a false concept of what the man is going through, why he's going through it. We don't go off and charge him foolishly. But Satan is accusing God. Did Satan in the very beginning, did he accuse God to Job? I mean, to Eve? Oh, he told you that not to eat there, because when you do eat, you'll be as smart as he is. Knowing what? Good and evil. So he accuses both ways. But here he's accusing Job to God, that now if you let me, we touch flesh for flesh. You know, we've touched his offspring. We've touched his animals. We've touched his money. But now let's touch his person. And when that happens, he will curse you. He will curse thee to thy face. And in verse 6, as you just, Roski said, he is there and he's in control of things. So there's the additional affliction which he is to suffer in his second challenge. He's going to suffer what we'll know as the boils. And we kind of know what boils are, but how does he describe how pervasive it was in his body? Head to toe. But it's not head to toe. It's the hollow of your foot. The word denotes hollow. It's translated sometimes spoon. To your heel, to your feet. We say to toe to ground, and I'm not saying against that. But when you look into the word, it's at the very bottom of your feet. It's from that's where if we're standing, that's where it starts. And where does it go? To the crown, top of your head. There's not a part of you that it doesn't go. So it wasn't a part of him that could say, here's relief. And just think of the excruciating pain. It's the Hebrew term denotes it could be an inflammation. And boils are that way and that would create pain. Have y'all suffered pain, physical pain this last week? You wake up that way, and what do? We take a little powder, hope it's the right powder, and all of that sort of thing. And we have ways of dealing with pain. How's he dealing with pain? What does he have to scrape his boils with? Potsherds. What does that mean? And he must be out in a place where they put all their broken pottery, right? Ashes, maybe not a graveyard, but a junkyard, where they take the stuff that they don't need anymore. And feeling his pain, he's going out there and he uses those broken pieces of clay and pottery. And what is he doing? He's scraping them. And we talk about scratching. I'm trying to get rid of that irritant. Wow, where's it on your feet? Yeah. It's on my head too. There's not a part of me that's not there. So he could spend a lot of his time in doing that. But it's not just I've got boils, I've got pain. I've got pain with my boils. And when you start dealing with pain, people are humbled, aren't they? We're looking for relief. We're looking for solutions. We're looking for how can I just get away from that. And sometimes it's very hard to do. And I know some of you understand that in a personal way. But this is where he is. And we are introduced here, and we only see this wife brought forth in chapter 19. That's the last time we'll talk about her. But what was her attitude toward Job's suffering? The suffering is here now. She's very close to him. And she's the one that is going to be involved in kind of dealing with what this is like. And so we find that he sat down in the ashes. Then his wife said unto him, dost thou still hold fast your what? I would assume yes, God sees that. And I don't think it's going to change here. And she's seeing that. You're still holding fast your integrity, your relationship. I'm innocent. I'm innocent before God. That's all that matters. Integrity. And he says, renounce God and die. My Bible says renounce. Some of your versions say what? Curse God and die. Now, what's that attitude? And different views about that. But we look at it from the standpoint, let's put the best meaning, motive behind her words. What would that be? Stop his suffering. So you say, goodbye, God, and die? Or curse God and die? Well, here's the issue. This word renounce, this word curse, is found in your Bible, bless Jehovah. It's found in Ruth when the people are just greeting and saying hello to one another and then saying goodbye. It's used in the sense of bless Jehovah, like Jehovah's blessings be upon him and upon you. It's goodbye. And if you could look at it that way, which some do, where you're looking at her just seeing his sufferings and realize that there's not going to be any remedy, just say goodbye to God and die. That's the best you could put upon it. And you would have a point to be made from Scripture. And that word has a very broad meaning. But how did Job react to her statements? You are a what kind of woman? Foolish. You're so sympathetic, babe. Let me go. You're a foolish woman. I mean, dying is foolish? No, there's something deeper in her heart that's not that good. Why would she say curse Jehovah? Let's put it now that it also could be used as cursing. How could she say curse Jehovah and die? And that's connected with his integrity. You're holding fast to your integrity. Why don't you just curse God? Put it in that way, how does that mean? What does that mean? Goodbye, God? No. What would be foolish? What would be something that would be saying, God, you're a problem? And Job, you still have your integrity? If you hold fast to that, and I do not doubt that, I've heard your words and I've seen your pain, God must not be for you. Curse him and die. He's not worth serving. I think that fits. She's lost her faith in the goodness of God. Just died, Job. He's not worth serving if he allows this to bring on. Yes, sir.
And also emphasizing that when he says, shall we indeed accept good and not accept adversity?
Fruit. And what is he receiving now? That's right. And I think that shows his heart. That fits with this idea of what she's saying is not right. But it's where apparently this isn't working, Job. And she's pretty close to where the friends are going to be, aren't they? You have sinned, and yet you still hold your integrity. If you're true, now they don't believe it's true. They believe he's a sinner. But if you hold to your integrity, I'm your wife, and you hold to that, curse God. Because he's not worth serving, because he's not helping any. And what more pain can you endure? Curse God and then have relief. And Job will spend the 3rd chapter telling you that wasn't what was foolish about her, because he's looking at his days. David? It could be that. She could have that. But that means he's a liar. He doesn't really have integrity, which I think I can hold to integrity. She sees that. So, but that's a possibility. That's where they're going to be. So it may be the same place. Fite?
I think about Jesus says to the people that talk to him, even behind me Satan. Isn't this also Satan working?
And Satan means adversary. Devil means I'm the one that's I'm kind of, well, he's an adversary too, but he's accusing us. He's the accuser, and yet Satan means he's an adversary, and he indeed is an adversary, because what is he doing to him? And what was your point there? Peter was saying, Lord, you're not going to die. Get behind me, adversary, because what? He had to die, didn't he? And he had to go through that pain, learn his sonship, and learn through his suffering. But that's a good point. Satan's in midst of it. He's causing this, and he's testing the integrity of Job, his heart. I think he's already got the heart of his wife. She's lost the idea that God blesses, and he's even in our times of adversity. But here's a point that I think is good for our time, is that God gave permission to do these things that are really the ultimate test in our life, when we have to suffer the pain, and our friends are suffering, our husbands or wives are suffering. But what did God say you can't do? How many today would be willing, if they were in Joe's place, put a gun to their head and move on? And go to a doctor that, hey, make it good death, euthanasia. I'm ready to say goodbye. And I'm ready to die. Let me have a good death. And that would be a euphemism for suicide. How many doing that? Yes?
Well, I was just thinking that people that engage in mercy killing are really more concerned with their own suffering than they are with the suffering of the individual. And I think Job's life falls into that category.
Very well could be, because she has to be suffering. So that's where we're putting it in her context. We can understand that, and we have to kind of work beyond that. But I think she just had it, didn't she? So she just heard God die. Any other thoughts about her? He will say in the 19th chapter that his breath is far into her, and my children they're not going to look to my supplication or my entreaty. And it's in the context of his friends, it's in the context of his wife, context of his own, the children of his mother, and in the sense that these are his brothers and sisters, his very close familiar friends. He's all strangers to them. Now, whether his breath was stinking, I don't know. But living with him was repugnant to her to see what he was going through. And that's the point. She's suffering from that standpoint too, that even his breath is repugnant to her. Yes?
People sometimes forget that from the first chapter, much of what Job's loss was her loss also. It was just, she wasn't
That's true.
in the flesh, and she wasn't the one being tested.
That's right. She's an indirect object, isn't she? She's feeling, I think she feels his pain too, but that's true. Or any thoughts you want to have along that line? All right. Number 13, what was Job's response to his second extreme? He didn't go commit suicide. And I just paused there. That's a great example that we don't have a right to take our own life. Even when these circumstances can be pretty bad, we have solutions. And more people have been in war and going through their difficulties. You'll see advertisements of that. There are organizations set up. We have one here in Houston of just taking care of those men who fought in war and trying to save their lives, because it's a very difficult time. But this needs to be in our minds too, that as a creature made in God's image, I can learn from this that maybe there's going to be some lessons I learned from this, so I'm not going to pull the trigger tonight. And maybe the morning rises and you can have some reinforcement. Now, I don't suggest go to a place where they're going to be silent for a week. I don't know how that's going to help you, and we're getting ready to get into that. Tita?
Well, I think his words, he speaketh the truth unto punishment. It's not even in his mind to do so.
That's right. He holds that integrity. David? Okay. All right. What did Job's three friends do to show, get it going, to show compassion? Is that a correct question in your mind? You need to test all this. But we see in verses, and we don't know that Job did not sin with his lips, as you made point, Danny, that shall we receive good at the hand of God and not receive evil, adversity, is there? So Job's three friends. Now, thank you. There's three of them that we'll be introduced to them and see them a lot. But Eliphar, he's called the Temanite, and that may be in Teman. We're talked about the land of Uz. We've talked about on that map, it's kind of the north of, is in that peninsula, Edomia, Edom, in that particular area that we see. That may be where this person's from. The other two are very difficult to locate in history as far as time. Bildad was a Shuhite, and Zophar the Naamathite. But they apparently were from a distance. And just think about it for just a moment of how the word got to them. That their friend, he was well known in all the East, but one of great possessions. He'd be known by other people. But these were friends of his. And for the word to get out to a distance, maybe 250, 300 miles away, would that take some time? They had agreed to a meeting. The word meeting denotes the idea it can be an engagement, marriage engagement, that people are committed to one another and a promise to be married. Words used that way in the Bible. But they have an agreement coming together as a meeting. Did they do that by Zoom? Well, why didn't they? Everybody does. Oh, they didn't have that, did they? They didn't have that. Telephone. They didn't have that, did they? Word's going to have to be taken. Pony Express. Oh, that wasn't there either, was it? Word is going to get out. And then they have to come here. How long has Job been hurting?
Weeks, possibly even months.
More than that. To the point that when they come and see him as they're coming from afar and they see him from a great distance, what does the Bible say? They didn't recognize him. A lot of time has passed by. Or a lot of damage has been done to his body. They didn't recognize him. But then all of a sudden they do, don't they? All of a sudden, that's just not somebody. Hey, that's Job. And we're not told what they said next, but I've heard people say, oh my, what's happened to him? I didn't recognize him. And because you remember them as you did, and his body and his appearance has so much changed. And we know that it's doing its work on just the pain factor. And so what did they do? They throw dust up in the air, ashes. They weep, because that's our friend Job. And they came, and they did what? They did not speak a word to him for how long? Could you do that? Could you do that when you have compassion on them? You could. You could keep your mouth shut for a week because you cared about somebody. I don't mean you personally, but you.
Being that present, being with them, all that.
But you wouldn't say a word of comfort to them?
He was in bad shape.
I know that. I'm talking about them. I'm trying to, I'm with you. I'm saying, well, I could be quiet for a day. Just sit there, be silent. They know you're there, and that's why I asked the question of compassion. And you may be right, but the Bible said they didn't speak a word to him. Not a word of condemnation. Yeah, the friends will be doing that pretty soon, won't they? They're silent for a week. And I'm thinking, that would be hard to do. And would the person that's going through that, and y'all have a meeting around here, and you don't have a word of kindness from me? Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and your pain hadn't left. Where's the compassion? And I look at that as, I'm not ruling out compassion, but you could put me at a funeral in a denominational church, and I've been there, and I'm sitting on stage or the pulpit area, and I'm preaching a funeral for somebody that has denominational background, and they're breaking out in just, God, how great thou art on piano. And I'm sitting right up there. And everybody's looking. The people who are grieving, the people who don't know me, people who do know me. And you know what I'm going to do? I'm not singing. Would you? Maybe it's the first night. Maybe it's the second night. Maybe it's the I'm thinking that these three friends, because you know they're getting ready to get after him, they have so much wisdom to offer. They've got it all figured out, and maybe that's where I am. I got it all figured out. I've got how authority is done. But I don't care how many times I would be in that same situation, I would not speak a word. And what happens? Some will criticize you, but other brethren will see he really believes that. He's got conviction. How could they comfort someone when they have the convictions that we're about to read about? You're a sinner. You are the worst kind of sinner. I have no word of compassion to offer you. But I see your pain, so we're just being quiet. We're being quiet. I could see that as a harmonizing point here, just like trying to figure out where the wife is coming from. So most of us will say compassion, but I offer that to you that will fit with what we're about to see real quickly. But not a word was spoken. Yes?
We also, and I know I've been in this situation here, trying to comfort someone who's going through a hard time or is suffering, and I find myself saying, I don't even know what to say.
Right.
So, and have I ever known anybody who fell as far as quickly as Job? No.
So they may just be dumbfounded.
Just like, and they came and they traveled all this distance and then they didn't recognize him at first. That shows how far it's come.
Right.
And so to just be, what can I say? What can I say that's going to comfort? There's not, words are not going to comfort in this.
But I'm thinking they might not think it's right to comfort a sinner in his ways. I'm taking that step forward as a possibility. But your point is, I don't have anything in word of comfort, so the wife's saying to me to be quiet.
Initially, they tore their clothes off, they mourned for him.
Yeah, I'd be mourning for a sinner.
So at that moment, they did know what to say. And then they talked for the friend.
Oh, you think they talk?
Well, I'm to each other, and then in chapter 3, we hear more.
Yeah, but I'm just trying to understand. Maybe you got it. Maybe they just talked, but when it said not a word, I'm trying to figure out in that context what that means. And I don't think I could be quiet for a week if I had compassion for somebody. I'm not going to say all things work together for good to them that love the Lord. So let's get through this, Job. I'm not going to be something saying I'd rather be quiet than pervert Scripture.
It's possible it might
Yeah, the cultural thing of showing mourning was very cultural, but I'm thinking what they're about to do, they had this worked out, and you just see the hatred in their heart about him being a sinner. And I'm wondering, could that still be here? So I don't have anything to comfort you with, and if I did, I would be doing wrong, so I'm not going to do it. And I don't care how long it takes, 7 days. Time, we're up. So we'll begin with we'll get into chapter 3 next time. Thank you for your comments.